Hello, this is Liz here from Liz at Home in Cape Town, windy South Africa today. Welcome to my channel. I want to thank you for joining me today. Today I'm going to be trying out the gouache that I bought, one of the sets of gouache that I bought in my last haul. That's this Arrtx Gouache that comes in the little pans, and I'm going to be using Prime Art, which is an inexpensive hot press watercolor paper. It's made with honeymoon hot pressed watercolor paper. It says it's got a smooth satin finish, so I thought I would use this to try. You don't have to use watercolor paper for gouache, but it's probably going to give the best results using it. So I'm just going to set up my page. Alright, so I have prepared my paper with some low-tack masking tape just because I wanted to divide the page into 4. I have with me 1 jar of water which is not completely full. I've been doing a really interesting gouache class on Skillshare. I will actually link it for you below with an outstanding teacher, and I have got a code that can give you, I think it's a month's free classes on Skillshare, and then you may decide that you want to sign up. I love my Skillshare membership. I learned so much on it. I have a flat palette. This actually comes out of one of my watercolor sets. The lady that I'm doing the class with recommends a flat palette rather than a very recessed one for gouache. And then I have my paints. I have another jar of water just in case I need very clean. She uses this half jar so that she can really swish her brush around, and it makes quite a difference. I'm not going to swatch them all out. I'm going to show you what I'm going to do. So I thought there is not a white in this set, so I'm going to get one of the whites from the jelly cup set so that it's also an Arrtx white. So I've got my white jelly cup out. I'm going to open it and see what that looks like. I'm going to leave it like that. I'm planning to kind of put plastic over it. I've got myself a palette knife. I'm going to give it a bit of a stir, and I'm going to, it's like baby food, dish some art into this palette, and maybe just a little bit more here to keep clean. I know we don't want to use plastics, but I've used some, I think you guys call it saran wrap. We call it glad wrap in South Africa, to put around this, and hopefully, and I spritzed it with water, and I'm leaving that there. And now I'm going to try and do, let me see, I think I'm going to go with this color, which is so pretty. This is called agate green. I do have my trusty little wet wipes, I hope. Oh, they're finished. Oh well, I'm just going to wet this one in the water and clean off the palette knife. Got a cloth here. The lady that I was doing the class with also recommends a cloth rather than kitchen roll, so I'm obediently doing that. I'm going to put some of this out here. And then I think I want to blend it. What shall I blend it with? This one. going to just use my brush for this one. I think that's actually easier at the end of the day. All right. And perhaps I'll use a little bit of yellow. Now the thing with gouache is that you can reactivate it with water, so this doesn't have to go to waste. It's just not as nice and creamy as when you're using it straight from the pot like this. So those are the three I'm going to use right now. I hope I've not been totally off camera. I've taken them out into my little palette. The point of watercolor is to use the white of the paper to make the paint to lighten the color of the pigment. When you're using gouache, you actually use the white gouache to lighten the pigment, to give you that creamy look so that it doesn't look like watercolor. You can water it down so that it's very thin. So now using this, and it's nice having the water not so full, because you can really swish the brush around. This brush is now filthy. I need to get it clean. I do have some paper towel here just for emergencies. I'm using the clean water because I don't want it all stuck up in the bristles. Okay, so now you've wet your brush, clean water, actually on your cloth, drying it off so that it's damp but quite dry. Now using the gouache, just like this as it comes out of the little pot, I'm going to apply it straight to the paper here. And with this particular gouache, it's really quite creamy, but it's thick and it doesn't spread very far. But I reckon with this is actually amazing. Now you put your brush just like this. Can you see? Just the tip of the brush into the water and work that gouache with that. And you thin it down a bit more. And it's going to a creamy consistency that spreads further but is quite a wet wash. Okay, that's interesting. With the other gouache I was using, I needed to thin it down. This has gone too thin. So now I'm going to add a little bit more of this gouache into that thinned bit and work it. It's like making plaster. And that's amazing. It feels amazing. It's like creamy, soft. It just, wow, it feels absolutely amazing. So now what I'm going to do is actually try and do a variegated wash with this gouache. Okay, so I'm going to start. Each time my hand moves to the side, I'm just dipping the very tip of the brush in to wet it, and then I will even dry it a little bit, and then I'm going to mix in the gouache here, and I'm going to start, drop some water, my pale wash at the top here. And now I'm going to mix in a little bit of white into that. Just dipping the tip into the water, adding a bit more pigment. It's just wobbling when I do that. And now going on over here, so it's a little bit more pale. And then I'm going to rinse my brush off, dry my brush off, and go over from the top down so that the blend is nice and smooth. Now I'm going to rinse my brush off again, dry my brush off, get more white. I hope you can see this, and mix the pigment in. And then I'm going to carry on from there. Going over that. And then I'm rinsing my brush off again, drying my brush off, and going from the top down a bit, which is giving that nice blend. Now I'm going to take some of this turquoise, and I'm just adding the tip of my brush in the water again. It's beautiful sea green. And I'm going to add that there. And I'm going to rinse my brush off. The water looks pretty gross pretty quickly because it's quite thick paint. Drying the brush off and running it over the join. I've rinsed the brush off again, drying it off, taking some white and mixing that into the turquoise to get a bit more white. And I'm going to see how that works. I need a bit of water on the brush, it's too dry. So I'm just mixing it in on the palette again. Going to get a bit more pigment on that, both the white and the turquoise. And now I want to try the yellow at the bottom of that and see what it looks like. Just rinsing my brush in the very clean water once before I go in the yellow. Mixing a bit of that up with the water. And because it's a watercolor medium, it's activating the paint that's underneath it a little bit, which is helping with the blend. But I've got too thick a little bit at the top, so I'm rinsing and drying the brush. I want to try and bring that down. I don't want the brush to be too wet. Now I'm going to repeat the process and go through all the colors. I start with the dark one again, and it's one needs to work it a little bit before you put it on. That was just a bit too thick, so I'm just working it again. I need to learn to take less on my brush at a time, and I've just sped the repeat process up for you a little bit so that you don't have to watch it all again. I think one of my greatest mistakes in all watercolor is that I work the things too much. I need to learn to leave well alone when I'm done instead of going over and over every. My opinion of this gouache is that I really like it. I suppose the test will be to see how long it stays nice and moist. I also thought it would be interesting to see how it works. I'm going to do one of my, just a flower. If I do a stem and a leaf. This is a Pigma Micron pen, so it's waterproof. And I'm just doing a very rough sketched doodled flower. Which I'm going to sort of colour in. With thinner. That was wet there and the micron pen is bleeding. Just dry that. I struggle to get my brushes clean. Sort of greens it up a little bit more. And I'm going to paint the petals with that. So if this was a colouring book, this is what you would be doing. And again, I'm just dipping the very tip into the water, and then I take it back to the palette and work it into that, which just thins the paint out a bit more so that it spreads more easily. And if it's not spreading, then one repeats that exercise. I may have thinned it down a bit too much here. This one is thinned down and actually looking quite nice. I've got the wrong size brush. I need a detailer brush. Now I'm going to use the yellow. Got a very tiny brush. Let me try them. This is a 40, which I suspect is going to be too small. But it's easier to stay in the lines. I needed to leave my micron pen a little bit longer to dry. It is waterproof, but you are supposed to leave it to dry. And I'm being in a rush. So I'm going to finish this little flower and let it dry, and then I want to come back and see how pencil works on top of it. I did another variegated gouache wash using some of the colors, and I think that one turned out really nicely. I find it quite hard on camera to do things. I lose my concentration and I'm not that confident, but that was with a mix of the Arrtx jelly cups and these other little thingies. I decided I needed a longer area to do the wash in, to get through all the colours and to choose colours that actually went together better. I am covered in paint. I'm such a mucky plug. Because of the shingles and everything being sore, I've got like a scarf on, and it went and dipped into the paint and proceeded to cover me with bits everywhere. So now I'm just going to, this is dried, show you how it works with pencil. What do you guys in America say? It tickles me. Over top. I would say on top of it. I love the way language kind of is different depending on the country you come from. So I would say I'm going to try some pencil on top of it. I think you guys would say I'm going to try some pencil over top. Have I got that right? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to know. So it's going on quite nicely, the pencil. No problem. And because this is hot press paper, the texture of the paper doesn't bother the pencil. One's got to bear that in mind. So if you were in a coloring book, it should be fine. So if one wanted to do a bit of detailing, bit of a rough job of blending here, but just to show you that it works quite well on top of the gouache. So if you wanted to use it to fill some larger areas, oh look, I've missed a petal. I use the gouache sort of in my coloring books every now and then, but I'm quite keen on just painting with it and painting with watercolor, which is why I've been buying it. But it's fun to use in the coloring books as well. I get bored quite quickly, so I like to try different media and things to keep myself engaged. I'm just taking the cream to bring those together. That's, you see, I mean, that's so much easier than spending hours on getting a great pencil blend, unless that's what you enjoy doing, and that's also fine. So I blended this with the pencil blender as well. Unfortunately my video stopped filming, but luckily we didn't miss too much, and it was absolutely easy on top of the gouache, so that worked quite well. Let's take this off here. As you can see, it's got quite nice clean lines, but I managed to rip my paper by taking the masking tape off a bit too roughly. I think the detailing on top of the gouache has worked very nicely. So now I'd like to take this opportunity of thanking you for watching the video, and I'd like to ask you to leave a comment if you would be so kind, and to remember to subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thanks for watching, have a colourful week, and see you in the next video. Bye bye now.